All right. Hello, everybody. Apologies that I'm a couple minutes late, but my computer decided to reboot very slowly, so I apologize. My name is Nick Klosky, and I am one of the co-founders of Honeypoint 3D, and I welcome everybody to the webinar for the monthly 3D printing and 3D design and 3D kind of everything. Today we have some questions that people asked, which I'm going to go over, and I'm also going to go over some things that are looking new on the Fusion 360 front that I think are very exciting. As always, we have, let me look down here, we have people that are online. I invite you to ask questions. I really want to answer people's questions that they had on Fusion 360, on Mesh Mixer, on really anything with 3D printing. All of our 3D printers are working in the other room, so that's great. So we're very busy and doing lots of fun things. I want to get to one of the user's questions first because she has to go. So this question was submitted by Sarah. And Sarah asked a question last month about working with some medical scans and doing heart things. And so I wanted to come back to another question that she had on that. So let me screen share here. Click this a couple times like that and share my screen. So let me bring up a picture. I apologize if this is small. I wasn't able to get my HD recording on in time for this, but hopefully you can see this. So Sarah had a question about how to create a graph, essentially, of an aorta in the heart. So this is called a homograft, I guess, homograft right here, which allows you to kind of fix a looks like a too small piece of anatomy with maybe a graph that makes it a little bit larger. So she had two questions about how do you cut this and open it up, and you want to figure out what this shape would be, and also just print this part. So I'm going to move this over here for my reference and bring up the 3D file that Sarah sent me. Here we go. All right. So this this guy on the right here is kind of the sick aorta. This is an example of one that's a little bit more healthy, and this would be kind of what we want to mix with this. So the first question is, how do you cut this and open it up? I'll start with this guy. And again, we're in Mesh Mixer right here. Awesome piece of software. So there's a couple things that I would want to go over with this first. Now, this is essentially, if we look down here, a hollow tube that goes up, obviously, to take in blood. I was thinking of a couple different ways to do this. First, if you just care about the inside, which is maybe what we would care about for answering your question, Sarah, we would go into here to select. We would change the expand mode here to crease angle. We turn up the crease angle. So what that does is in the select tool, I can just click a little bit of, let me zoom in here, a little bit of this, I guess, wall, and then I hold down the control key and right click drag. So again, this is control key, right click drag. What this does is this expands my selection only on this crease angle. So I've selected that. I'm going to hit the C key to go over here. Just click on this a little bit, hold down Control, right-click, drag, and I've selected that part. I need to do the same thing for these top three here. So I'm just actually going to click, 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 hold down Control, right-click, drag. There we go. So what this does, I can click Delete. And what I've done is I've separated the inside and outside shells. So now, for example, if I just go to select, click a little thing on here and say expand to connected, you notice that the inside did not, let me zoom down here to show you, the inside did not get selected. If I hit delete, I now have just the inside part, which is maybe what I care about when I want to do the graft. So maybe that helps you, Sarah. You also asked a question about how to cut this in half. Let me go to the other aorta. and just kind of show you on this one. So this is nice because it is pretty generally a straight line from top to bottom. So I'm going to orient it in this way and go to analysis, or actually to edit, to plane cut. And I can cut through the tubes up here if I want. And I just draw a line straight down through the center and click. And actually what I can do is I don't really want to discard both of these sides. So I'm going to say slice and keep both with a remeshed fill. So you see I've cut it. You can't actually really see that I've cut it. Up here, this is an open border because I went through these little things here. But if I hit the select key and just click something right here, like a little bit, and say E for expand to connected, you see that it only cut through, it essentially sliced through one side. I can go up here to edit to separate, and that separates it into another object, which you see down here in the lower right, which I can turn off. So now we have a really awesome kind of cut that we could use to do your grafting. We can bring in the other one here. I'm going to transform it, kind of move it over so that it is somewhat on the other one. Actually, we really only care about this part up here, so that's what I would care about. And click accept. So with this, we can do the same thing up here if we wanted to get kind of like for like. We'll change the crease angle, select that and delete it. Again, down here, crease angle, select that and delete it. And actually, because of the way that I plane cut this, I actually would need to do the same thing on these edges here. But I think that I have cut this so I can select, expand. No, that's actually probably still connected up there. But you can kind of see where we're going with this here is that, ooh, zoom out a little bit, is that now that we have kind of a shell here and a shell here, what I can do by kind of selecting part of this sick aorta and deleting it, you see now I have an edge here and an edge on this inside part, and I can start bridging and joining these. And I would, essentially what I would want to do is select, you know, all the way down the center of this. I would select, let me turn this off. There we go. I would select allow back faces. I would select all the way down the center of this, and then make that selection a little bit better, and then bridge these two things together, right? So it's not probably the best aligned thing in the world, but I could kind of move it to show you. I would bridge one of these to the other, maybe make this one very, very close, and then kind of seam it all the way down. So that's one way to do it. Let me just exit out and go back in. One other question that Sarah had was, how do you find just what shape this part of the object is? That's actually really easy. If you hit the select tool and just select, right? You can select an area that you would like on the model. And I've kind of selected underneath. So what I'm going to do is do that same selection trick of crease angle. Just click there and separate that. There we go. So I would select just an area that I think is very nice here. You know, the part that I would want to do the graft on or whatnot. Hit the B key to smooth boundary. So I have a nice smooth here. And I can do a couple things. If I wanted to take this off, I would just press Y. And what I've done is I've isolated that part. So if I turn off everything else in the scene, I have isolated that part of the healthy aorta. And I could go and move that onto the more sick one. If I needed this to actually have thickness, I would just hit Control A to select it and hit D to extrude it. I could extrude it off of the normals or off of the constant. Normals kind of makes it go out. and constant makes it go up. That's probably way too thick, but something like that, like one, half a millimeter thick, gives me a nice little patch that perfectly matches what was there before. So that is one way to do it. And then the last way, if you wanted to kind of build up the aorta, let me go back in. It was kind of a cool trick that I figured out. Not figured out, this is well known. But if I go in and do the same selection trick with the crease angle up, just click a little bit there and then go around like that. You can hit the T key for transform, and that's going to stretch out just the very, very top right here. It's going to stretch it out. So what you can do is you can start stretching this out and kind of rotating it like that. When you get it kind of to a place where it would normally turn, you just say accept. Then you hit the T key again. Now you're transforming this, and you've made kind of a little junction. Right, so I'm going to kind of bring this out, say accept, transform, kind of bring that out. And you can do all sorts of things. You can scale this up or down, so I can make this a little bit more narrow, move it over. I'm not being accurate at all with this, but I can say accept, hit the T key again, face transform down, look at it from a couple different angles, and move it. And so on and so forth. And this original starting one has actually popped up. And you can do all sorts of things by selecting it and hitting it with a smooth operation like that to make it a little bit more smoother. All sorts of things. Don't save. Stop sharing. Go back to the video here. So hopefully, Sarah, that gives you some information. If that didn't answer kind of what you need, then email me and I can kind of try to help you again. But those are some different techniques for offsetting things, for extending things up, all sorts of things. Hopefully that helps. All right, so we had a first question from Craig that says, rotation and registration of half-hull 3D scans to take off lines. Can an STL format scan be readily rotated and set to a Z? So I'm not entirely, rotation and registration of half-hull 3D scans to take off lines. Well, let me try to, so Craig, I would, oh, great, Sarah, okay. So Craig, please, let me know if this isn't what you're talking about. So let me screen share again. Go off into infinity here as I bring up Mesh Mixer. So Mesh Mixer's default thing is a bunny like this, and this could be kind of like a 3D scan where the bottom of the scan is kind of open like this. Sometimes, let me just transform this bunny and move it up and maybe rotate it. The scans come in at a place that is not proper. You see this little red dot in the center, and that's kind of the center of the grid that you work on inside a Mesh Mixer. How do you get that down there? I actually just answered this for somebody else. You can do a couple things. It is actually two uses of the align command. So if we say edit to align, the first time we would use it was we would go to surface point, and we would click somewhere on the surface that we would want to align. Now this doesn't have a bottom at all, but I'm just going to click on the tail, which will get it somewhat close, and say accept. So what that does is that will get the part, most of your model down right at the center. If you hit align again and say base point, you see the object kind of moved a little bit over to the right. That is now centered at the base of the object. So using two align commands can kind of align it there. Obviously this isn't the proper way to, fully align this bunny. You have to do it a little bit manually, but that's maybe not the question that you were asking. But let me Yeah. So Craig, if that wasn't what you were looking for, then please just ask a little question thing. Or if you have a link to a scan, I can certainly download it while we're on this webinar. Totally fine. So let me go to Darren's, and then Craig, if you want to provide clarification or whatever, please do so. Okay. Darren, hi, I'm new, only around 30% into the Fusion 360 course, but I have a question that I hope isn't wasting anyone's time. No question wastes time. Is it possible to create a shape on a sphere? For some reason, it won't let me select a surface to create a shape on the sphere. Yeah, okay, so let me bring up, I just got an email earlier that Fusion was kind of down or degraded, so I'm not entirely sure if it'll be up, but let me see. So let me screen share again. And like this. Okay. So Fusion, no, it doesn't look like it's down. All right. So we have a sphere. Let me take a sphere like this and create a sphere. So you want to create a shape on the sphere. Totally, absolutely true. The only things that you can create shapes on top of are called planar surfaces. So if we had created something like a box down here like that, we could go and create a sphere on any face of this box. But if we want to create it on the sphere, you see that the sphere isn't highlighting. You're not able to do that. You're not able to create it. It's only on planar surfaces or on sometimes on edges. But for the sphere command, it would be only on a planar surface. So how to get around that? Let me get rid of this box down here. Click, click. There are a few ways to get around that. You can do so by creating a sketch. So if we create a sketch, so I created this sphere right in the center of the origin. If I create a sketch, I can essentially look at the sphere. A nice thing when the sketch palette comes up here on the right-hand side, if you say slice, what that means is it deletes the view of everything that blocks your way. So I'm just looking at the sliced sphere and nothing that comes out from it. That's very nice sometimes to use. And what we can do now is say project. I'm just going to click on this sphere. So what that did, if I take off this body and click project, actually, let me go down here. What we want actually is intersect, not project. We want where the sphere intersects this sketch plane. If I click stop sketch and I turn off my body, I now have this sketch here, and I can create things from that. If I, as an example, if I wanted to go and create a box, I can click on different parts of that sketch and create a box on that. If you wanted to really, really create a box on top of that sphere, you'd have to do a couple different things. Creating offset planes, for example. You can also create, let me go through here and do that. The long story short, let me turn back on the origin. The long story short is that you cannot create objects on top of other non-planar objects. Example of that would be sculpt objects. Let me kind of bring this up, make it a little bit more. Let me actually make this a very good example and create a crease on this. Modify crease. I'm going to crease one edge of this sculpt object and show you what that does. Finish form. So this is another example. If I want to go create a cylinder, I can't select anything, right? I can't do anything except I can create a cylinder on this plane, as you see, kind of cut in there, because when I creased this, it became a planar edge, essentially flat. None of these are planar because you see there's a slight curve to them. If you want to create something on top of a planar surface, you would have to do it in a few different ways. I'll kind of give one very, very quick example. Let me create an offset plane, like way up here. This plane is a planar surface. If I create a cylinder on this plane up here, that's great, like that. I can extrude this down. So I would say extrude to the object. And I can select either extend faces, which won't work because it won't, but I will chain faces. So what that's done is based on a flat plane up here, I created a starter object and then I extruded it down. Let me turn off these sketches and the origin. And you can see that it's a very nice curve. This cylinder now matches the edge of this kind of pillow shape very nicely. But it started with this construction plane here, which is planar. You can do things with all sorts of different shapes in also the patch environment. Let me get rid of this. If you go into patch, you're in the surface environment. If we start with a sketch example like this, a spline, and extrude this out, non-planar again. When you're in patch, you can do all sorts of different things by like popping off these sides. I can go and delete that side. I can create all sorts of different shapes inside of patch. It's kind of a different environment, but you can do some other kind of building things off of this that you have more flexibility in the patch. So let me go back here. Darren, I hope that this helped answer a little bit, but the long story short is you can only directly create shapes off of planar surfaces, so surfaces that are flat. You can still do it in other ways where you project surfaces onto onto curved and non-planar ones, but you have to do it kind of in a reverse way. You can also do things by starting other objects off inside of other objects and build them out. And then you just do a combine command to combine them later. Remember, you can have all sorts of different objects kind of taking up the same space, and then they can all just merge together very easily as well. So that's another way to do it. If I didn't answer your question, please ask again. All right, let me click on that. All right, let me go back through. So Darren, for example, making a thread on a sphere. Okay, an example of that would be a helix, right? You would use the coil command, and you can actually, let me go back into Fusion. You're not seeing my screen. And do. Okay. One nice way to create shapes is that you're not actually creating a shape on a sphere. What you can do is, and this is kind of a little bit advanced, but I'm going to create a sketch down here of a spline. Like this. Now, if I kind of look, it's all on one plane. But what I can do is, I press escape, I can right click and go to move and click on one of these, and I can actually move these up. Now you see that this is high up in 3D space. I can move other guys up like this. I'll move this one up higher. And let me move this one even higher. And let's, just for fun, move this down. I click Stop Sketch. I have a full 3D object. I can create all sorts of things with this. I can say create a pipe on this, and I have a full 3D pipe based on that sketch. The very, very nice thing is I can go back, double click on this, and I can edit, I can move this somewhere weird, click Stop Sketch. Oh, well, I think I edited it a little bit too much. I made that pipe not able to make a turn, but you can kind of get the idea that you can create very, very nice things with just sketch lines. So you can do that with the spheres as well, maybe, if that helps answer your question. So let me just stop sharing and go back again. All right, Craig, let me... All right, Craig, I will be happy to download that. I think I'm logging in with a different account, so just approve that account and I will get in there. Darren asked a question, can you create a circle and make it a sphere? Not too easily. The ways to create spheres inside of Fusion 360 is the create sphere command in the model environment. You can also create a sphere in the sculpt environment and create a sphere that way, and then it's all sculptable and all that. If you wanted to create an actual sphere, actually there would be another way of creating a sphere in the sketch environment. If you just draw a half circle and profile, and you could revolve that all the way around. That would actually be another way of doing it. There's always many different ways of doing things inside of Fusion. George had a question, what about editing STLs in Fusion? You can kind of do it. Let me go and screen share again. You can kind of do it inside of Fusion. Go like this. Let me bring up a bunny like this. I'll just export it like this. So I'm going to export this bunny as bun to the desktop. All right, and let me download Craig's thing in the background here. Done. Okay. Editing STLs in Fusion. So I have my insert mesh command right here. I can insert mesh, I'll select that bunny, and the bunny is brought in here. Now I can do a few things with this inside of Fusion, but it's not really that easy to find. I can go right-click at the mesh at the very bottom in here and say Edit, and I get some tools. So modify, I can remesh it, reduce, make closed, right? This is an open mesh right here. I could close this off, smooth it, plane cut it. I can select different parts of the mesh, just like in Mesh Mixer. Delete them if I want to, but that's about it. Merge bodies, essentially a Boolean union. I can say make closed. Kind of fixed it pretty well. But that is about all inside of Fusion. Sometimes if you don't see this as well, what you can do, if you don't want to click, actually, I can say finish mesh. And we're still in the timeline here. This is essentially what's called a direct editing or direct modeling feature. There is no history of things recorded when you do things. You just go back in. You can edit this mesh later on, do all sorts of things, but it does not record a history. You're not able to record those. But that's about it. I'm going to right-click on this and edit. That is about it. You can insert mesh, kind of convert it, a B-rep to a mesh, not too much more. One thing I have found is if you're doing things like remeshing or reducing, the Mesh Mixer code, let me go back in here to talk with you all face to face. There we go. The Mesh Mixer code has been updated when it was brought into Fusion. So in Mesh Mixer, if you have some models that are taking a long time to run a remesh on or a reduce on, you might be better served bringing them in to Fusion 360 and running the reduce or remesh inside of there. I found that for those couple little commands, the code is maybe a little bit more advanced and it uses a lot more memory and can make things go faster inside of Fusion. There's not too many commands inside of Fusion. They say that they're bringing in more over time, but you know, you can do a couple things in there. There are other things that I have in my Fusion 360 course about how to use the mesh section, how to do cross sections of the mesh with splines. And that's really powerful because you can create cross sections of any mesh object, and then those become spline curves that you can use to create sketch objects or lofts, all sorts of things. It's actually really useful, and I use that quite a bit in my scanner, which is sitting down there. And when I scan things and bring it into Fusion, I can create mesh sections from that and create really accurate reconstructions of all sorts of different shapes inside of Fusion. I have a call coming in, but I will not answer it. All right, Craig. All right, so let's go to Craig's here. Let me open this up and find Craig's here. And let me share my screen. Like that. Okay. Let me bring Craig over here. All right. Craig asks, I am hoping the Mesh Mixer can do the rotation and set the origin. All right. Oh, no, totally. Mesh Mixer can do all of that. So what would be the best way to do this? We can do this a couple different ways, but certainly you just go to Edit to Align, and you have different options up here. You would probably want to go to Surface Point, in which case you have a ghost and a real. So the surface point, you kind of drag on here and you see that the object is kind of flipping all around, doing things like that. So I want to find some place that I want to be roughly up, and I would click Accept. Now that's up, but it's not centered right on the origin. So I would go to Align, Edit to Align again, and I would just say Base Point. And I don't have to say Translate and Rotate. I could just say Translate only. Most of the time that doesn't do anything, and I click Accept. What that does is aligns this on the, essentially the center. If I hit the key, T key for transform, I can do a little bit of manual transforming if I want. Kind of like that. Or maybe in this case, since the bottom of this is curved, I would go to Edit to Align and go to the surface point. And I would click actually on the tabletop that this was scanned from. A little variation right there. And this is a little bit more flat. Now here's another trick. If you look at this mesh here, it's still kind of bumpy. So what we can do is go in with a sculpt tool like Sculpt to Robust Smooth at the maximum strength and hit some piece that is absolutely not what I care about. So let me kind of go down here. So I don't care, and I'm going to turn off the grid for right now. So I don't care about this area at all. I'm going to hit this with the Robust Smooth tool and absolutely smooth this out. This is now completely smooth on this side. It was a little bit wavy before, but now I can go to Edit to Align, and I would hit Surface Point and click right here. And you see that the model, as it's aligning to the kind of world plane, is not flipping around at all. When I was on this before, you see it's kind of like jiggling because each one of these little triangles is slightly not, not straight. But because I hit this with the surface, the Robust Smooth tool, these are totally straight. So I go like that and I click Accept. And now if I turn on the grid again, you can see that this object is just rock solid right on the flat plane. I can hit the T key to transform, And if I just use this green, I'm not moving it any up or down, and I could move, this wherever I wanted it. I can rotate it to be right, things like that. You can also do some other things to help with rotation. If you go to Mesh Mix here and you drag in a plane, this plane is completely flat. And you can kind of test to see how flat your object is compared to the test plane. So if we rotate in here, we see that this part on this side right here, if I hit the select key, this part is very flat and this part isn't. It looks like there's a little bit of an angle done. You can do things at all different angles. I have the plane selected. I hit the transform key. I'll move this plane up by 90 degrees. You can do some comparisons where this would be concerned. Turn off. In this case, I could hit the T key and move this over. I say this is a 90 degrees. That's pretty darn good, right? I can move this a little bit more and try to get this right parallel to this. Great. And now when I bring this into something like SolidWorks, it is aligned to the flat plane, and it's aligned to a plane that is 90 degrees, essentially, left and right on this. So let me stop sharing and bring that back. Oop, too big. So I hope that answers your questions, Craig, about how to align things. There's lots of different tools, but that's really useful and something that I use for scanning quite a bit, because it's very annoying to bring something into, for me, into Fusion. That's a little bit off, and my cross sections don't work very well. All of that. That is a great way of doing that. So hopefully that helps answer that question. Great. Just to follow on, one thing I really did want to share was with Fusion. Let me bring up Fusion again. Closed it, and you're still seeing me, but let me just export this and just say Craig, STL binary. Okay. I'll share my screen with everybody. Screen share, share, and share. Okay. One thing, Craig, I don't know if you use this. You said SolidWorks. I really like this. If I say insert mesh and I say Craig, and I bring this into Fusion, we're right here. You go to Sketch, and you say Sketch, create mesh section under mesh. It asks what mesh do you want to use. I say like this. It now gives me some cross sections. I can go and rotate this. I'm going to maybe rotate it 90 degrees here. I can move this down like that and say, OK. You see I have a little yellow or kind of orange line there. I'm going to do the same thing. Rotate this 90 degrees again, and then move this one down here. So I just did that twice. It creates two sketches. You can kind of see those two sketch lines. I say Sketch, Mesh, Fit Curves to Mesh Section. I click on that, and I can click on one of these mesh sections. Again, I'm going to click the slice command. Actually, I don't even need to see the mesh right now. And here is the mesh section. I would say that my curve type is going to be a spline, and I want to match this within maybe 1/10 of a millimeter. I start clicking. I click once on here, and then as you see, as I click this, I am creating spline curves that are matched to 1/10 of a millimeter. And I click OK, and I click Stop Sketch. I'm going to do that again. Sketch, Mesh, Fit Curves to Mesh section for this one. And click Slice again. And I'm just going to super duper quickly just click. Not the most accurate thing I'm doing because I'm doing it super duper fast right now, but I say Stop Sketch. I now have these two sketch profiles that I can connect to each other. If I go into the patch environment, I should be able to say create a loft. create a loft. This should work. Let me see. Between this, actually, let me go back and turn off the mesh section here. Sketch. Let's see if this will work. Well, let me kind of do a fakey part of this. So let me go create a profile here. Actually, sometimes this does and doesn't work. So this didn't create a full-on profile. I'm not entirely sure why. But if this were properly working, I would be able to create profiles and then loft all the way to this. If I did this with the bunny or something, it would work. If I did this, I've done this in other webinars, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But you're able to create these sketch profiles really, really accurately with Fusion. That's pretty cool. I usually kind of try to set it up a little bit better before I do that, but that's just kind of a cool thing inside of Fusion. No other questions. I wanted to share one awesome thing that is coming to Fusion 360, and this is really, it's going to change a lot about how we use Fusion, and it is the sheet metal preview. Fusion has had a lot of features happen over time, but there's a new one coming that allows you to create sheet metal. Essentially, you create your object in all different kind of ways, and then the sheet metal will allow you to unfold it into a flat shape to allow you to cut it out of like a laser or a plasma cutter or something like that, and then it would be folded into the right areas. That's awesome. That's not something that I would use all that much, but somebody has already been playing with the sheet metal functionality in ways that it was never, ever intended for. And I just want to show you where on the Autodesk forums you can find that to see what's going on. This sheet metal preview is not open to everybody. It's only for select testers now. But I want to show you something to kind of get your mind rolling on really, really awesome things that are being done with this that Autodesk never even intended. So let me screen share again, share, and open this up. So if we go to Fusion 360 forum, I misspelled that, but that's all right. Open this up. If you haven't been on this forum, please go on there. It is really, really nice. Very, very friendly people helping other people. There should be top kudoed post. So it's down here, it says top kudoed post for everyone that wants a wrap function in Fusion 360. This is an example right here. This is actually page 3. This is, let me scroll down here, this shape right here that, I wonder if I can expand it. Very, very super complex. Wrapping this around the box, the person who created this said it took about 3 minutes to create. 3 minutes to create this design. Completely in, this is also an example, completely done in Fusion 360 with no other tools. This was just started out as an SVG, a scalable vector graphic that was popped up, and then with the sheet metal tools wrapped around an existing, actually it wasn't even wrapped around an existing object. This was modeled flat and then bent using the sheet metal tools. Let me go back here one more time. Some really good examples inside of here. Let me go back to page 1. And this is just kind of a very easy thing. You model something like this, very flat with just cutouts with a little seam right in the middle, and then it wraps around itself to turn into something like that. And literally you could create this in about 3 minutes with some spline cuts. Scrolling down, wrapping things like this around objects. This is coming inside of Fusion 360, and this is a really, really great forum thread to post on. The person that did this is Phil Procario Jr. He also has another thread with videos on how actually to do this. Again, you can't get access to this unless you ask for it, but it's coming. And I just really wanted to show this because it shows, let me stop sharing here. It shows that, I'd like to see myself here. It shows that the Fusion team is creating new tools. With this tool, you'll be able to do all of the sheet metal bending that you need, and it's really, really functional and easy. But for the 3D modeling side, these examples online show functions of Fusion that Autodesk never even thought would happen, that allows toroidal bending of shapes across other shapes. Super, super cool. So please look at that and see what can happen. So Craig gave a comment. Awesome. All right. I'm glad I could help you, Craig. Juliana. Oh, I will go back to Rena's question. Thank you. Hi, Nick. I want to make a shell of my sculpture, cut the sculpture, and print my 2 parts. How to make that? Okay, easy. Let me screen share. Thank you, Juliana, for taking care of Reno like that. All right. Let me just bring a bunny because that is the easiest one. Replace. And let's make the bunny manifold. Okay. There are a couple ways of cutting things in half. You know, obviously, if you go to edit to plane cut, that can create a cut down both sides like this. And in this case, I would be cutting the bunny. You see half of it is ghosted. But up here in plane cut, you would just say slice and keep both with a remeshed fill, usually is what you want. And you click accept, and you have a bunny. Except if you hit W, you see that there's a line right down the center of this bunny. An example to show this is you hit select, just select a little bit here, and if you hit the E key, or you go to modify to expand to connected, it is expanded only to the connected part of that. You can hit the Y key, edit to Y right here of separate, and what that does is it puts it into another part, essentially another object. You can turn off the little eye here, and you see that you have half of this or the other half. And you could print those. You could do whatever you need to. Now, people have done this also. Let me undo all of that. Cancel. If you wanted to make it hollow, you would do the same thing. You would go to Edit to Hollow right here. Mesh Mixer will make it hollow. You can see a preview on the inside. You can change the offset distances inside of here, like a little bit bigger offset, and say update. You'll see that the ear will disappear down inside, and now we have a 2.8 millimeter offset. We click accept. Doesn't look like much has changed, except if we go to the X-ray shader here, we can see that we have stuff inside of other stuff. Let's go back out to the normal shader. If we go to edit to plane cut now, we can plane cut down the center, slice and keep both. Now let's see what we have when we hit select, expand to connected, and separate like I did before. We now have a hollowed little bunny that we could print out in chocolate, and this would be like a hollow type of thing. Let me stop sharing and see if that helped answer his questions. So let me go back up. I want to make a shell of my sculpture, cut the sculpture, and print my 2 parts. So hopefully that does answer the question. You can use the hollow command to create a shell of whatever distances you want, and then use the plane cut to cut it in half. The hollow command works off of real world units. In that case, it was like 2.8 millimeters. Really, really make sure that you go into edit or analyze and units and dimensions, and make sure that your model is appropriately sized. In Mesh Mixer, you could work on a model that you modeled in 12 inches. But in Mesh Mixer, it thinks that it's 12 millimeters, right? This small. totally fine. Mesh Mixer will let you do it and let you work on it. But then when you work on the hollow command and you try to shell something of a 2mm shell that's only 12mm tall, the hollow command will fail. So make sure that you're working on appropriately sized objects, because it's all real world things. If you have something that is 120mm and you want to make a 2mm shell, it'll totally work. But something that's only 1.2mm and a 2mm shell, that causes a failure. Make sure that your size settings are correct. And that's pretty simple for that. All right. So there's no other questions. I really want to appreciate everybody coming. We're actually full this hour with questions, and questions I got beforehand and questions that were after. So please, in the future, send me questions before the webinar so I could do some research on them. And but if not, I can do some kind of spitballing and research during the webinar. Thank you so much, and please visit our website for our classes on Mesh Mixer and Fusion, and we're coming out with more classes as well as our rapid engineering services, so we can do modeling for you if you want, or we'll teach you how to do it yourself, all ending up in 3D printing, all of that. Thank you so much, everybody, and have a great rest of the week into the weekend. Bye-bye.